Hello and a warm welcome to all our listeners joining us today. I'm Florence Habeck, the Global Director of Marketing at Kinexa. I'm pleased to be your host today. Before we start our presentation, I would like to share a brief overview of Kinexa. Kinexa is a technology-driven pharmacovigilance company with over 15 years of expertise. Our end-to-end solutions optimize drug safety data, ensuring precise results uniting pharmacovigilance excellence and best-in-class technologies to connect life science company with the right safety solutions. We are pleased to have you with us today. This webinar aims to empower you with insight into navigating the latest medical device regulation. Our expert, Veronika Valdova, will provide valuable guidance on integrating medical device into pharmacovigilance portfolios and share practical strategies for establishing robust readiness and management processes. To kick off, I'd like to go over a few practical details. This webinar presentation will last for approximately 45 minutes, followed by a brief Q&A session at the end. We welcome our listeners to ask questions at any point throughout the presentation by using the Q&A section available on your screen. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to our expert, Veronika Valdova. Veronika brings extensive experience in the pharma and medical device sectors, with a focus on EU regulatory compliance. Since 2017, Veronika has been assisting device manufacturers in transitioning from MDD to MDR, ensuring adherence to the latest regulation. I will now hand over the presentation to our expert speaker, Veronika.
Thank you, Florence, for having me here. It's my pleasure. Here is the agenda for today, and I'll do my best to cover these topics. This is a very brief overview of medical device vigilance requirements in the European Union. The European MDR, medical device regulation, is not a standalone regulation. It needs to be taken in context of other standards and industry guidelines. In medical devices, numerous topics are specified in full detail in ISO standards. For pharmacovigilance departments that are taking on device products, the most relevant ISO standards would be ISO 13485, which is quality management systems, ISO 14971, risk management, and biological evaluation, which is 10993. So that's the three most important ones that would be relevant to pharmacovigilance departments. From medical device guidelines, we have got the legacy guidelines from MedDev, that was from Medical Device Directive. Many of them are still valid, especially the one on vigilance. And the other relevant ones would be post-market clinical follow-up studies and clinical evaluation. All the others are also relevant for devices, but they would typically more concern the manufacturer rather than pharmacovigilance departments. With MDCG guidelines, they specifically tie to the MDR regulation, the new one. And the first one, 2023 free Q&A on vigilance concerns any typical questions manufacturers have on vigilance of medical devices in relation to the new regulation. The others, we'll go through them a little bit in a little more detail later. And the third big group of guidelines is IMDRF. Those are international. And the most important part for vigilance departments would be terminology. There are also a number of forms and templates that are included in some of the guidelines, and some of them are provided separately. This graphic shows the product life cycle of a medical device. Before the medical device can enter the market, it needs to either obtain market clearance in the US or get certified by a notified body in Europe. For class ones, there's just a notification that's obtained through a national competent authority. But for anything class 2A and higher, there needs to be a notified body involved, and that requires certification. So before the medical device can enter the market, there needs to be some clinical investigations performed, unless the device can claim equivalence with something else that is already on the market that is similar in all the essential attributes. Once the product has been launched, there needs to be a post-market surveillance plan in place that is implemented and kept up to date by the manufacturer. For a pharmacovigilance department, the important component would be to follow this post-market surveillance plan exactly as defined by the manufacturer. And this plan is product specific. Very, very often you would have a post-market surveillance plan that covers a group of devices that are somewhat similar. So if something is a surgical instrument or a dental implant or a wound care product or a wheelchair, all these different devices would have their own specific post-market surveillance plan. So there's no one size fits all. It's always important for the pharmacovigilance department to communicate with the quality assurance on the device side. Vigilance is part of post-market surveillance. Other components can be screening of scientific literature, which is tailored to whatever the device is and whatever its risks are, and other activities. There's also an obligation to write a periodic safety update report, which details all the safety information that occurred within a monitoring period. It's a document that has the same name as the one for drugs, but it's a completely different type of document and follows different rules. There's a specific MDCG guideline for PSURs in devices. Any outputs from this life cycle, from this post-market surveillance process, would become part of the risk management file. And if there's any kind of safety issue, then there would have to be some sort of action, such as corrective and preventative action, or field safety corrective action, or recall, or update of labeling, or whatever else. The confusing part about the medical devices is in definitions. In drugs, we use the terminology fairly consistently across different jurisdictions, and we have good ICH guidelines, but that's not the case in devices, where these definitions differ from country to country, and have also follow a little different concept. Incident does not always involve harm to patient. So once you've got an incident that may be some sort of a malfunction or deterioration of the device and its performance, it may result in a side effect, but even if it doesn't, it may still be reportable. We'll come to that later. That's the part that needs to be defined by the manufacturer, and any escalation from a complaint to an incident or a reportable incident needs to be well understood in the context of what the device is, and it's the job of the quality department to define what the reportability criteria would be. Then we have got serious incidents and public health threats, which are tricky in the sense that they've got very short timelines. In investigations, again, the terminology can be very tricky because whilst in post-market surveillance, we call these events incidents, whilst in investigations, it's an event. Additional confusion may stem from the fact that studies in medical devices are called clinical investigations. Serious adverse events in medical devices have a little different definition than what you see in drugs. So the seriousness criteria would not typically fit your settings in a safety database. Here we come to the reporting essentials. That's the what needs to be reported by whom, where, how, and when. There are a couple of essential forms in medical device vigilance, and that is manufacturer incident report form, so-called MIR, for reporting serious incidents and incidents. This report is this form is shared by IVDR, that is in vitro diagnostic devices, and it follows both devices that are certified by MDR or IVDR, and those that still have the old certification, the legacy devices by Medical Device Directive, and active implantables and in vitro diagnostic devices. So that's the same form for all these devices. If a person who works in pharmacovigilance opens this form, they would find some of the fields very confusing because the concepts are very different. Each incident needs to be investigated, and this investigation requires close coordination with the quality assurance department, because in every case it's necessary to find the root cause of the event, and in the initial in the initial form, in the initial report, you just need to tell the national competent authority what happened, and in the subsequent ones to include the analysis why it happened, what were the past incidents, if there were any field safety corrective actions before, what is the exposure of patients. That means how much of this product was sold in the past. So they actually have the exposure data. This is very different from drugs. And in the end of the day, say if there is any action that needs to be taken in a response. If it's necessary to take some sort of safety action, it would typically be done by circulating a field safety notice in a response to either a regulatory authority request or in a response to initiative of the manufacturer. So that's a field safety corrective action. It's a safety action that is done if there is a safety issue with the device. That includes update of safety information that is distributed with the device, which is instructions for use. For pharmacovigilance departments, there is a relevant component in the need to monitor field safety corrective actions that occur in third countries. This is something that would be typically specified in agreements with the manufacturer, who is ultimately responsible for the whole system and reporting. If there are similar serious incidents that occur on a more frequent basis, and there is already a field safety corrective action ongoing, then it's possible to agree with the competent authority to send it on one periodic form instead of multiple individual forms. This needs to be agreed with the authority in advance, and that's the responsibility of the manufacturer. Trend reports, this is the part that is very different from drugs, because in pharmaceuticals, you typically wouldn't know how many patients were exposed to your products. In medical devices, this is known. Every device has a UDI. Every manufacturer knows how many units of the device were sold, and the estimate of patients treated by the device is part of each report. So if there is a statistically significant increase in frequency or severity of incidents, it would be a reportable event in itself. So in summary, reporting is the responsibility of the manufacturer. It's supposed to be reported into EUDAMED, which is the European Medical Device Database. However, that is not yet available. So until it becomes available, national vigilance reporting procedures remain in place. And that's the MedDev vigilance guideline that we saw in the beginning. So that's the one that would apply to the actual procedure. The tricky part is that not all national competent authorities have a portal. Some of them actually accept emails. So the reporting form would be the MIR form with exportable XML. So you would send them one PDF form that can be filled in by hand. If it's a small manufacturer, there are quite a few of them on the market, so they can still fill it in by hand. But that does not absolve them of the responsibility to have the information stored somewhere in their systems. So although it's not technically necessary to have a safety database, most manufacturers who are larger and would have some reports absolutely need one. For reporting timelines, it's shorter than for drugs. Serious incidents need to be reported within 10 days. Any other reportable incidents have to be sent in within 15 days. And serious public health threats have 2 days reporting timeline. This is very tricky because within these 2 days, it's necessary to first learn about the incident, decide that it's a potential public health threat, and do all the internal discussions on whether or not this would be reportable, and then take action and send it in to the competent authority. When it comes to the interface between a pharmacovigilance department and medical device manufacturer, which is typically a different legal entity, it can get very tricky because 2 days simply isn't enough time, especially when it comes in on Friday. Here are some studies in medical devices. This is a tricky topic because there are different types of studies in medical devices. Some of them, like clinical investigations, follow the entire section of MDR on clinical investigations and are considered studies. like clinical investigations. But also there's another group which is called PMCF, that's post-market clinical follow-up, and that's the part that the pharmacovigilance departments would typically encounter. And it's very common. It's a very popular way of obtaining evidence for a recertification of medical devices, because MDR is a lot more demanding on the amount of and quality of clinical evidence that needs the manufacturer needs to have to support the safety and efficacy requirements. So to obtain this clinical evidence, manufacturers typically very often opt for PMC studies. And there are also different kinds. Some of them are performed within the specifications of the device. That is, the purpose of use is unchanged. And the other factor would be burdensome and invasive procedures inflicted on the patient. So there are studies, post-market clinical follow-up studies that are within the intended use and do not inflict any burdensome procedures on the patient. So it's done exactly as the treatment protocol would go, without any intervention from the manufacturer. Manufacturer just collects the data. That's the one that would follow MDR article 87, 88, 89, 90. That's the post-market. And all the others would have to follow the entire clinical investigation section. So it's very important before diving into reporting to understand which section applies, and ask the national competent authority if they would like to be informed about any other reportable events that may be relevant for some high-risk devices or specific high-risk populations, or it can happen, and especially in Germany, it happens quite a bit. I don't know about the others, but it's if in doubt, ask the national competent authority what else do they want to see. It's better to have it in writing than running into a problem afterwards. For investigational studies, we have this serious adverse event that must have it must have a reasonably possible causal relationship with the device or the procedure. Again, the causality assessment is a little different than for drugs. There's an exception in the UK where they want to see all serious adverse events, not just the ones where there's a causal relationships. They want to see it all. Again, with device deficiencies, it's necessary to report even the ones that might have led to a serious adverse event. So there wasn't an actual patient harm at that time. You can imagine insulin pump that fails. Nothing happens because it was prevented, but it could have led to a serious adverse event, and in such a case, it would be a device deficiency that would be reportable. In investigational studies, there's an MDCG guideline 2020-10/1, and that classifies serious adverse events into 4 levels by causal relationship. That is different from drugs, so it's important to have the database properly set up to make sure that the correct scale is used for devices. This brings us to guidelines that would be important for a vigilance department. So the most important one is the MedDev on vigilance system. Then PMCF studies, that's post-market clinical follow-up studies, and clinical evaluation that may be important when or if the PV department also does literature searches. That is product specific, and it's a topic in itself, how to search literature for medical devices. It's not like with drugs, where you have got clearly specified what type of information you need to collect for each product. Here, every single literature search is tailored to whatever the device is and whatever the risks might be. MDCG guidelines, the most relevant ones would be a post-market clinical follow-up plan and report, and questions and answers on vigilance terms and concepts. That's the transition from the MedDev to EU MDR. Here we also have the MDCG guideline on PSURs for devices. IMDRF is an international organization that produces all kinds of guidelines in the medical device sector, and one that is absolutely essential for pharmacovigilance departments would be terminology. Without the terminology, it's impossible to complete the manufacturer incident report form, and it needs to be part of the database. So if you have a database, you need to make sure that this terminology is included, and it's mapped to MedDRA and FDA medical device reporting coding system. So it's all interoperable. The important part on this terminology is the fact that it covers more components than MedDRA, and it also includes some of the concepts that are specific for devices. The medical device problem information, that's the actual incident, what happened. Then we have got patient information. That's the part that would be compatible with MedDRA, because that you might want to track certain types of events across drugs and devices, because you may very easily end up with a drug that, or a product that is a drug in one jurisdiction and device in another, and also for combination products. So especially for the ones that are classified differently in different countries, this compatibility with MedDRA is especially important. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to detect any kind of signals. Also, part of the report is investigation of the incident and its root cause and outcome of the investigation. So it's essential that the PV department in the pharma company and the QA in the medical device company closely cooperate to make sure that this is filled in correctly. It's the responsibility of the manufacturer, which is their QA, to give you the answer. Quality management system, ISO 13485, that's the most essential ISO standard in medical devices, and post-market surveillance is essential component of quality management system. The biggest part is complaint handling procedure. There are the definition of a complaint needs to be very broad because it needs to cover all jurisdictions where the manufacturer is marketing their devices. You always need to record awareness date because the vigilance timelines across the globe differ. Then a mandate for the company employees to forward the complaint or to report it somewhere. And this is especially important when you are dealing with multiple different business entities. So a company that is a manufacturer or part of the manufacturer or a department needs to send the complaint either into a system or by email or any other way to the entity that is processing the complaint. In this case, it would be a pharmacovigilance department where it gets picked up and investigated and processed and eventually either reported or not. Then another topic that is discussed widely within the industry is complaint form for devices. There's no single way how to prepare a complaint form because it typically differs by the device. It's typically device specific. When you have a wound care product or embryology pipette or a surgical device or dental implant, each of these devices has different things that the manufacturer would be interested in. They may be directed at a different type of user. It can be the end patient with a wheelchair, or it can be a surgeon who is dealing with middle ear implants, or a wound care nurse. That depends on who is filling in the form, who is it intended for, what the product is, and what the specific risks are. So there's no one size fits all for complaint forms in devices. There must be an appropriate method of contact. It typically would be a sales rep or either in person or a dedicated phone number or an email, but it really depends who is it for. There also needs to be a procedure for obtaining the products back. That's because the manufacturer must perform a root cause investigation. What happened, why, and for this reason, they need the product back. That's not something that we worry about with drugs. Then there needs to be a process for investigation of complaints. So the product, once collected from the end user, it needs to get quickly to the place where somebody can perform the investigation and document the process as well. And the next part is escalation of any issues, such as recall or field safety corrective actions. Also, if it's a complaint, there needs to be a way how to decide whether it's an incident that might be potentially reportable. So there are a lot of components that need to be implemented, and that's all part of the ISO 13485. The last or almost, important part is the difference in who is responsible. There are different obligations of the different economic subjects. In drugs, we have got a marketing authorization holder who is responsible for reporting. In devices, we have got the manufacturer. If the manufacturer is not established in the EU, they would have to appoint one authorized representative, and that's the one that would be responsible for these activities in the EU. With a pharmacovigilance department, they can also closely interact with the distributors, because if the distributor on the ground collects complaints and incidents, it could potentially go directly to the PV department, and then to the QA through the PV department, but that depends how it is set up, and we will get to that later. The general obligations of manufacturers include, among other obligations, to implement and keep up to date a post-market surveillance system, and maintain a quality management system, and have a system for recording and reporting incidents and field safety corrective actions. So the entire vigilance suite of obligations is the manufacturers. So when it gets delegated anywhere, it needs to be covered by an agreement and a process. With the authorized representative, he just must inform the manufacturer about complaints and reports about suspected incidents. The obligation for everything else is still with the manufacturer. There's another element that is different in devices as compared to drugs. With pharmaceuticals, you have got quality QPPV, person responsible for qualified person for pharmacovigilance. In medical devices, you have got PRRC, which is person responsible for regulatory compliance. It's somewhat similar. Some of the obligations differ. It may happen that QPPV and PRRC are the same person, but it's not typical. And typically, you would have two people, and there needs to be a close communication between them. So QPPV on the pharma side, if they perform the processing of the incidents, needs to be in very close cooperation with PRRC, who is the person responsible for medical devices on for the entire system, post-market surveillance and vigilance. Here we have got the responsibilities described in Article 15. MD sub, medical device systems audit approach, is a popular way how to improve the marketability of one's products. But it's mainly that the audits performed by one authority are recognized by others. And the important part for pharmacovigilance departments handling device products is the agreements that are described in Annex 4 of MD sub. That is which components need to be included in the agreement to make sure all the components of the ISO 13485, which is the quality management system, which covers post-market surveillance, what needs to be covered by the agreement. And that includes roles and responsibilities, interfaces, process, and all the elements that are part of PMS. When addressing practical challenges of implementing medical devices in pharmacovigilance portfolios, it's important to bear in mind some of the components that are specific for devices. The applicable vigilance regulations for covered geographies need to include all the definitions and all the reporting timelines. The definitions differ from one country to another, and the reporting timelines also differ. A report that is incident that is reportable in one country can have implications on other countries, such as something that is reportable in Japan would have to be included in a European MIR, so that if something similar happens in Europe, past events that occurred elsewhere would have to be included. There needs to be a procedure to determine reportability. So there needs to be a way how to escalate a complaint to a reportable incident, and that needs to be done in compliance with whatever is already defined by the manufacturer in the post-market surveillance plan. The device the risk management file documentation is device specific. So there's it's not possible to have one template and use it for everything, because every device is different. Every device has specific risks. So it's essential that these risks are well understood by the pharmacovigilance departments, and when in doubt, have a procedure for contacting the QA department of the manufacturer for any clarifications. There also needs to be a process for documenting the reporting rationale regarding reportability. So it needs to be very consistent. So the same type of event is either reported or not, based on some sort of written criteria. A written instruction needs to exist on how to complete a vigilance report. So there are components that are very clear, but then there would be items that would have to be escalated internally, and also with the manufacturer. So there needs to be a process, a written instruction on how to do it properly, so people do not improvise. The appropriate information on the product needs to be readily available. This sounds trivial, but it's a common cause of unnecessary errors. A good way how to solve this problem is to select a device in a database and have all these attributes that do not change already entered, and they wouldn't have to be touched by the person who is processing the report. There also needs to be a responsibility for translations. In Europe, there are 27 languages, and since Eudomed is not yet functional, then it's necessary to send the report to national competent authority. Many manufacturers have two versions of a report, in local language and in English. Some only work with local language, and only if there is an issue, they work on some kind of translations and rely on IMDRF codes to detect signals. That's also a way. But some have the primary documentation in English for all of them. There needs to be a process for follow-up. It's not like with drugs where you have got a template email that can be used. Here, every incident involves investigation of the root cause, which makes it highly personalized. Instructions on submissions must exist because they are continuously changing, because countries are gradually implementing new systems, and there's Eudomed that is still pending. So there will be a shift from national databases to Eudomed at some point. There needs to be a responsibility for oversight, which typically would belong to PRRC rather than QPPV. So QPPV, the pharma qualified person for pharmacovigilance, would have to closely coordinate with PRRC, and the ultimate responsibility would be with PRRC, since medical device reporting is ultimately the responsibility of the manufacturer. And it's also important to have any previous field safety corrective action at hand, and any kind of other incidents, sales data, and similar incidents that happened in the past with the same products anywhere. So that's the kind of information that needs to be available. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to send in your manufacturer incident report. There are some implied tasks, such as the IMDRF terminology for all the components, including regular updates of the system. You need a way how to generate a mirror report. It can be a database, but it can be done at hand, but you still need a way how to work with the reports internally. So a database is not mandatory, but it's an implied task. And complaints and vigilance reports may or may not reside in the same database. The only obligation is that they need to be linked. So if you have an incident, it always needs to have a corresponding complaint. Otherwise, you can have two, you can have more, but always it needs to be linked by a process, and the information needs to be retrievable in real time, which may be difficult to do if each of them is in different language and not accessible. And the last component is a data entry manual that needs to address any known concerns for each device and facilitate appropriate handling, including investigation and follow-up.
Thank you very much, Veronika, for your in-depth presentation on medical device regulation, essential for pharmacovigilance professionals seeking to master compliance and operational excellence to adapt their department to the change. Now let's see if we can answer a few questions. Our first question will be, where can I find the MDCG guidelines and reporting forms? Would you be able to help us with this answer, Veronika?
MDCG guidelines can be found on the European Commission website, and the same with forms. They are available. Some of them are within a guideline, and some of them are separately. You've got some links as part of the presentation, so that should lead you to the actual website.
Oh, thank you very much, Veronika. We do have just a short time for another question. Here it is. Do I need two databases, or do I need a dedicated safety database? Veronika, could you please guide us?
Technically, you only need to have a database for complaints, and it does not need to be a safety database. There are some who manage their information in Access database. Excel wouldn't work because it cannot be validated. But I've seen manufacturers who function within Access. However, when with bigger organizations, it's no longer feasible, and it's advisable to have a safety database. All the major ones have a medical device module, and they have IMDRF terminology already included, and are able to generate forms in major jurisdictions. So technically not an obligation, but it's implied. You cannot function without it.
A big thank you to Veronika for sharing her expertise with us today. Unfortunately, we are now out of time for any other questions. This is all we had for today. We will take the time to answer outstanding questions asking during our webinar via email. Your feedback is important to us, so please feel free to share your thoughts. This webinar will be available to watch again on the Kinexa website resource section soon. That concludes our webinar. Once again, thank you, and until next time.